is the first podcast with myself, Shane Gelderstone, and
George Wilson.
This is Real Talk, guys. We're here to talk about real shit to make sure that you are getting the real advice, correct advice, the scientific advice. We're here to educate and answer those questions that may be a bit taboo or a little bit you don't want to ask normal people, so to speak. So, George, who are you, my friend?
Mate, whenever I'm asked this question, I always just say I'm just George. It's literally been my answer since I was a little kid. There's nothing really too exciting about me, mate. I'm a pretty simple man. I like food, I like training, and I like bodybuilding. Nice and easy. But yeah, so I am George. Most of you will know me on Insta as Flex Coach George. I'm a coach for Flex Success, an Australian bodybuilding coaching cohort. We work with Gen Pop all the way through to the bodybuilding space at comp prep athletes. I've been a coach for quite a while now. Even though I'm only young, I am 25. I've been coaching for quite a long time now, man. I kind of started a little bit differently to most. The typical transition into coaching for people nowadays is, you do your first show. Once you've done your first show, tick, qualified coach, now let's go. So I started off originally helping a couple of guys at my local boxing gym just get ready for like making weight and stuff like that. Just basic, really, really simple understanding of energy balance and getting people in shape to some degree. And then as my own progression in bodybuilding on the personal side of things kind of developed, I started to realize I had a bit of a knack for actually, consistent long-term progress. And as I kind of piqued my interest within bodybuilding and where I wanted to go, I was like, I'd really like to see if I want to challenge myself and see if I can put someone in that position. And lo and behold, just over time, natural progression, I've eventually evolved into where I am now, working with only competitive athletes, or 99% all competitive athletes. Primarily, I am based in Australia, although I am from the UK. Doesn't make a lot of sense to most people. But obviously, Flex Success being an Australian company, I handle clients through them, obviously being an Australian base. So even I'm in the UK, I'm kind of an Australian coach, if that makes sense.
Perfect sense. So you have a fair few clients here in Australia.
I'd say 99% of my clientele is all Australian based now, whole way through.
And what would you say, how many female physique competitors versus male competitors do you have?
At the moment, it's still slightly more lenient towards male dominant, like 75%, 25%-ish. That is slowly changing. When I was working primarily more in the UK, most of my work was all female work, but obviously Flex Success, I'm kind of handling their work, and their scope of comp athletes does lie mainly in the male spectrum, which is why they brought me in to kind of jump in the female space and start to open their doors up a little bit more in that avenue.
Nice. All right, guys, if you don't know me, I'm Shane Gelderstone. Look, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm an ex-military man, but I'm a bodybuilder as well. I'm still an amateur bodybuilder. I've been competitive now for 5 years. I have been in the fitness industry for over a decade now, but really got into the online space about 4 years ago. The reason I want to get into the online space was that I wanted to be able to provide people, not just locally from a face-to-face train, I want to provide things at a broader aspect. I want to be able to get people in different areas. And what I really want to try and achieve here is that I want people to get correct knowledge, the right knowledge. You can go onto Google or whatever sort of search and try and find the information, and the information is abundant, but is it correct? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So it's really that bringing that message to people on what is scientific, what is correct, what has been proven, what has been studied is where I'd like to see and what I want to achieve from this podcast. So look, I've got a comp coming up next year. I will be turning 40 next year. I am based in Australia, so I will be doing the IFBB A season next year. We are aiming for the 100s. And looking to be probably my last show. I am coached by George. I have been following also Flex Success for quite some time. My reason for following them is what they bring to the table, and one of their sayings is "be less shit." And it's a great saying. They love their education, they love their knowledge, they love bringing that aspect to the table of correct information. So really come off the back end of what I've learned from them, being Liz and Dean and George, is where we really want to go ahead with this podcast and really talk about the things that people are probably a bit scared to talk about sometimes, and get that information out there.
Completely. The podcast, again, I've always tried getting podcasts running, podcasts going over the years, to kind of to drive in this message of how we can do bodybuilding in a way that's not going to kill us, essentially, right? We're talking about the taboo subjects, talking about PEDs, going into the health aspects, the risks, the rewards, the costs that you're going to have to take, and how we can do this in a manner that's not going to take 20 years off your life just by being a competitive bodybuilder. But finding someone who had that same mantra and same kind of ideology and direction for a podcast was quite hard, because it is quite a niche thing. But fortunately, one thing I've noticed since working in the Australian bodybuilding space is that I think it's more so come down to like the size of the country we're dealing with now, and how sparse information can be, and how there are little pockets of great resources of information, but they're so sparse. Like I compare it back to the UK and like the main hubs of bodybuilding around the world, and you've got America, UK, Dubai, and Australia really are kind of the big four. America and the UK seem to be, leaps and heads forwards in understanding of knowledge, taking more of an evidence-based practice. There's lots of people in America with the 3DMJ guys, J3, John Jewett and his crew, Austin Stout. In the UK, we've got plenty of people here like the Physique Collective, Callum Team Pro Coach. But in Oz, there are a few, but again, just that big scope of a place to get around and so many people to get the message out to, I feel like it's missed. I have a lot of consultations with people from Australia, and as the clients are coming through, it's the same things that I'm seeing, like these very old school bro science methodologies that are still kind of circulating around today, which, from working in the UK prior, I kind of feel like they were squashed now. But again, it comes to light. I think maybe we're probably like 5-10 years still slowly catching up a little bit in Oz. Not to say that there aren't people out there spreading the right message, but again, the whole point for me wanting to do this podcast was so we could address quite a lot of these issues, get a bit of a broader spectrum of word out, and try and bring just trying to improve the industry. That's the whole point of why I do what I do. It's just so we can keep improving the industry and keep pushing us in the right direction.
You talked about John Jewett there and Joe from the Physique Collective. They're people I've been following for quite some time, and I really respect them as experts in the field. The knowledge they're bringing out and what they're releasing is really going away from that, like I said before, bro science, to what's evidence-based science, which is, again, what we want to deliver here. So topics we're thinking about covering over the spans of this podcast over the next however long we're going to be. The more subscribers, the more viewers, the more content we'll be able to get out. So guys, if you ever want to ask us something, follow myself at Rock Solid Coaching on Instagram, and we also have George. What are you on Instagram?
Flex Coach _George.
Flex. There you go. Hit up the DM, bang out your question. We're more happy. We're going to have a roundtable episode once every few weeks where we'll just be banging out these questions and answers. So we're going to be talking of subjects of like the female menstrual cycle, the effects of training, nutrition, the mental fatigue, contraception. We're going to look at a few myths as well. So those old school myths of a waist trainer. Hand up, back in the day, from one of my old coaches. Again, I have no disrespect to any of my old coaches. I've learned from them, whether it be a good thing or a bad thing. I've learned from all of them, but I have done the waist trainer. What did I get from it? Well, we'll talk about another episode. We'll talk about HRT with females as well. Nutrition, PCOS, diuretics, mini cuts, growth seasons, the works and jerks. We want to cover all these topics for you guys on what's factual, what's evidence-based, what's out there, and really answer those hard to answer questions.
There was a little bit of a focus on the female side of things in that part of that bit from Shane there, but there's a good reason for that, because this is conversations me and Shane have had in consultation calls whilst I've been working with him, whilst he's been coached by me. And again, looking at like the knowledge that is out there at the moment in the Australian bodybuilding space, the typical like female enhancement practice that I've seen is very, very, I don't want to say wrong. Wrong is probably the wrong word for it, but it's not with the people's health and personal lives in mind at all. They're not really thinking about the individual at all. They're thinking about how they can get someone to the goal as quick as possible without caring about the risks. And maybe that comes from, I'd hope it comes from a lack of understanding more than ignorance, because then that would imply that the person's just an arsehole, right? And they don't care. But again, the thing that I've seen trending is a lot of old school methodologies and a lot of old school practices that should, by now, with current research we have out there, be null and void, right? These things that people just should not be doing, because, you know, it's not a question of enjoyment factor now, or doing these things because they enjoy it, they're still enjoyable. We're talking about the nitty gritty, the things that are potentially life and death, or you know, having effects on the quality of your life in the long run, especially in the female space, things like fertility, sexual health, early menopause, all these different things that are risks and things that we need to concentrate with females specifically. And again, just these conversations that me and Shane have had over the months have kind of spiraled into, yeah, it might feels like years anyway. You can tell by the fact that I've gone bald in that time. No, but it's these conversations that have led to this podcast. It's a serious space in the industry for someone to fill and start getting this information out. And again, I come from the UK. I'm in the UK now, and I see this across the board. Like, there are people in multiple different good facets of coaching groups, cohorts, that are putting out good information in specific fields, and biomechanics, PED knowledge, nutrition. It's all here and go thriving. But again, you know, this is a little bit of a lack in that. We've got a few good people within like powerlifting space with Nexus Performance and a couple of other good groups, but there is space for this to open up now and bring something valuable to the table, which is why we'd like to deep dive a lot of these subjects. So yeah, like Shane said, right, so over the course of this podcast, we'll be going through growth phases, fat loss phases, prep, mini cuts, all of the good overviews of typical things within our timeline and our periodization, but more specifically the nitty gritty, the ins and outs of the really minutiae topics that do need to be spoken about, again, especially in that female space, because there's such a big gap of lack of conversation. I think it's the lack of the conversation around females, drugs, natural females anyway, in any sense, just in bodybuilding, the risk associated, etc. So yeah, hopefully over the course of the next few months, we'll start to roll out a few good episodes, keep you all linked in and hooked in.
I think it goes back, I was reading from Lyle McDonald, so I think it also comes back to when they actually started studying females. So it wasn't until 1970 to really that the females started to get more involved into the sporting space. And even back then up to the early 80s, that they just had males and females and going, oh, they're exactly the same, and let's just put them together. When in reality, it's two completely different beasts. I don't want to say beasts, two completely different variants of people. So really the studies haven't really been done until later on. So the data there is really starting to come through, really probably, let's say, the last 10 years. Really, we're getting these professionals coming out and saying, hey, no, they are different. We need to be treating them differently.
100%.
With different applications to those protocols.
The common phrase used was, oh, they're just smaller men. That was how we perceived females in terms of physique, physiology. Well, obviously not physiology. We always have known they have menstrual cycles and they have different physiologies to us. But why, for some reason, that didn't give us an inclination that their nutrition should be different, their training should be somewhat different. That's a good conversation we can get into actually later down the track. That'd be a fantastic episode. Female male training specificity, yes. Whether it does need to be or not. Actually, that'll be a very good one. But generally, the scope of physique development was always just, now, females are just smaller men. Let's treat them like smaller men. Unfortunately, now that we're actually in the field where I guess you can even go down into like women's rights and everything over the last sort of 19th century into the 20th century, we're now in a position where females do actually train. They do bodybuild. We can get studies done on females. It's so much more useful information to us to be spread and spoken about now.
And guys, I think that brings us to what our goal is. Our goal is to bring this information to you. Like I said before, at the very start of this podcast, was that the information is out there, but what you can find can be so misleading. So we want to bring out correct information. That's ultimately our goal, is that correct information to use.
Yeah.
Well,
some good solutions in the meantime.
I think that's about it for the intro.
Yeah, sounds good, man. The pilot episodes are always a bit of a fluff. It's just, hey, look, who are you? Well, there's not really much to me, mate. I'm sorry, I'm a bit boring, but there will be a lot of good, useful topics covered coming up.
That's it. I lift heavy shit. I eat lots of food. I get on stage.
Simple, man. To be fair, how many weeks out are we now? I should know this.
Oh, what am I? 17 weeks out.
I thought it was 16.
I hope it's not. Maybe you're right.
I'm pretty sure it's just under 17. No. So yeah, Shane's coming up, season 8. It will be his finale show. he thinks.
We'll see.
I might see if I can squeeze one more out of him. Depends on how well he does. But no, so keep your eyes peeled, as well as listening to us on the podcast, guys. Keep an eye out on his journey into stage. It's going to be a very good one, especially if it is his final dance.
The final dance. So guys, would appreciate it if you do subscribe to this, share it, spread the word, get it out there, get it to all your friends. If you actually want to be a guest on this show, would love to have you on. But guys, basically, keep it real, and we'll keep on talking about real shit. But until next time, keep strong.
Peace.